This is Matt from Working Fintech, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Felicia Meyerowitz Singh, who's a fintech and wealth tech entrepreneur. She is founder and CEO of Akoni, where she successfully exited, and she's currently MD of FNZ, which is a top 100 wealth tech company. Hi, Felicia.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely welcome. So let's jump straight in terms of your story and your background, because there's lots of interesting companies that you've been involved with and set up over the years. Can you just talk through that to start off?
Yeah, so my background originally was from South Africa, and I had a very corporate background. I'm conventionally trained as a chartered accountant and a management consultant, so I do have a background in information systems. And then that in turn led me to coming to London, and my entrepreneurial journey started, where originally I was with a team and we left a big corporate, started our own firm in the Lloyd's market and sold that was sold to Willis. And I tried a few other ventures and before actually setting up Akoni. So I can say that I learned a lot of lessons along the way and continue to learn those and apply them to life in general. And I love the entrepreneurial, high growth financial services, fintechs, wealth tech market. I think it's experiencing an incredible amount of change. And we're really seeing that servicing clients and providing solutions to client needs is what's driving that kind of change. And being able to apply the technology and innovation is just an amazing, amazing opportunity being in the market.
So you mentioned Lloyd's. I've been into Lloyd's and have a friend who's an insurance broker. There's not many women in that market. How was that at the time?
So what's quite interesting is when I was there, it was in a very corporate role, and actually I was one of the very few senior women and young as well. So at the time, I didn't really think about it. It took me becoming a startup founder to really notice the difference in terms of senior women, because suddenly I was the CEO, founder of a fintech, and had to go out there, be fundraising, be speaking to all our clients and partners like banks. And that became a challenge with certain things where I was like, well, this seems strange. And you had experiences which I think in a way only women face, not ever only women, but women or minorities, and quite subtle differences in the market. And so it really made me reflect back on my time when, we were Lloyd's underwriter and Lloyd's broker, and wonder why I hadn't noticed it at that point. And I think there's something about the corporate world that to a certain effect sort of buffers you or protects you from, certain types of harsh realities, perhaps. And whereas when you become a founder, you just have to face them and deal with them. And interestingly enough, relating to diversity, as a result of that, myself and another female founder, Andrea, we set up an organization, a members organization called Hive Founders, to support early stage female founders. And that was to solve this kind of problem that, lots of people face these issues. And when you look at the statistics, they are appalling in terms of funding that goes to female founders. And what we want to do is contribute to the solution and be part of that. And now we have more than 300 members and so on. So there's a lot of challenges, but also opportunities in the sector.
And how early are we in the life cycle of people being more open and welcoming and things being more diverse? Are we still a generation away, or is it happening quick rate?
Yeah, I mean, I think the World Bank gives some sort of crazy statistics that if change happens in terms of, gender equality in commerce, it will be, another 100 years.
Really?
Before we get there. And COVID actually was a big setback because usually, not always, but usually women are in caretaking roles in addition to working roles. And during COVID, obviously, those responsibilities were ramped up if you had children at home or were taking care of elderly relatives and so on. And that impacted the gender agenda as it's called, and the progress. So I think there's a lot of statistics about it and a lot of media attention. But in fact, overall, we haven't seen much progress over the last few years. And I personally believe that we need some sort of policy level intervention, because this is not an issue of men versus women. This is a societal issue. And when you get something that's as complex as that, starts with, at childhood, and there's markers during education and during early career and progress through your professional life, when it's that complex, we need some sort of government intervention saying these are the markers, this is where we're seeking to change society. On the good news side, the UK obviously is one of the leaders in terms of promoting gender equality and everything that entails. So we're in the right market for that, but we need to apply it as broadly as possible.
No, I agree. It needs to be a government policy, because childcare in the UK is amongst the highest in the world, right? So then the decision, if you want to have lots of kids, someone's got to look after them, because it's too expensive to pay someone to do it.
Well, that's why I have one kid.
Me too. So talking about that. Firstly, if you can just explain what Wealthtech is, but on that point of having a child, you've got a child, not a 9-year-old, I think you said,
yes.
And you've started up multiple companies. You've had a successful company where you've been bought out. So how have you kind of managed all of that as well? And I think when we were talking earlier, there's a lot of energy there, which obviously helps. Yeah. But if you could kind of talk about that, but just before we jump into Akoni and what you did with that company, just explain to people, what is Wealthtech? Where does it sit, and what is it?
So Wealthtech is part of Fintech, and obviously Fintech is new technology to automate, innovate, improve the lives of clients who use financial services. And it touches all of our lives. If you are going onto an investment app, and suddenly you're able to do it on your phone, whereas historically, if you think back in the day, you'd have to call up a stockbroker, you wouldn't be able to access market data freely. Now, all of that has completely changed, and it's really democratized that for clients. So everyone should have access, and opening up wealth and retail investment is something that Wealthtech provides. Because sometimes you hear the word Wealthtech and people think, oh, it's for people who are wealthy. And it's not. It's for anyone who is slowly growing their assets. And that applies to almost everyone of working age in the UK, because we all get usually auto-enrolled into a pension. So even if you're only contributing £100 a month, you actually have a Wealthtech, a pot of, not Wealthtech, a pot of wealth, which is using technology to grow that. So there's a whole range of solutions, obviously, within Wealthtech, within in investment and the market, whether it's transacting and delivering, a new share that you want to acquire, or giving you access to IPOs, which historically only institutions had access to, or providing very large, complex platforms, which are simple for clients to use for, very large players in the market, names that we recognize, all the big investment platforms and so on. So it's quite wide ranging, and obviously for the younger generation who are very into crypto and NFTs, that is tangentially associated with Wealthtech, because the crypto market has managed to reach that younger generation in a way that perhaps traditional investment markets haven't. And that could be, the language that is spoken, or the type of risk that is associated with them, and so on. And all of that is changing rapidly, which means that technology has got to keep up to be able to provide those solutions that the end client wants.
Fantastic. It's a good description of Wealthtech. And you talked to us about Akoni and what is it? Where did the idea come from? There was you've been successful at the other end and have exited that company as well. Can you talk through that journey for people? Because there's lots of people always say they want to start up their own businesses, but there's a lot more than you need than that to actually do it. It'd be good if you can just share some of your insights.
Yeah. So the first thing is I highly recommend, if anyone wants to start their business, I always just say, go for it. Be aware you need to have tenacity and grit. Grit is my favorite word because it's a combination of determination, perseverance, never giving up. So that's the first thing. And I'm always happy for anyone to reach out who's looking at starting a business and just wants to chat. So that's the first thing. Go for it. The second is when I started Akoni, like I had a problem previously. I used to be a CFO of a very large corporate. We managed a lot of cash and there just weren't any solutions, unless I went to my bank and they said we weren't big enough because we weren't like a global multinational. So we didn't qualify for any of their corporate treasury functions. And they were in this weird sweet spot where we were too big to do nothing, but too small to get any access to services. And also for myself personally as a saver, I just found it very hard to move money between banks and deposits. And I'd worked in the market for a long time and been part of creating panels with insurers. So I knew we could create that kind of panel. And we obviously needed to build the technology, and open banking came along. So there were certain aspects of data that became streamlined. And the purpose is really simple: creating cash as a third-party asset, almost cash as a service. So a client could maximize returns on cash per their risk profile and move it around with only one point of access. You don't have to go and open 10 accounts with 10 different banks. You came and opened one account with my Fintech, which is a regulated company, and then we would prompt you as and when to move your funds around. So it came from a pain point that I had, and then it became more sophisticated as we developed the proposition out into the market with the aim of actually selling a full API-first solution to investment platforms for their clients. So we didn't have to build endless distribution, partnering with wealth managers and financial advisors and so on. And I'd say fintechs, if you are being regulated, can be very complex. So if you want to set up a startup, that's fantastic. If you want to move into a space where you as a company have to be regulated, you need the right team around you to understand that. Whether that is getting a compliance officer or the right board members or investors that, fit your vision and so on, because you have a responsibility to consumers or to other clients who themselves may be regulated. And that responsibility extends far beyond, say, a company that's, a startup that's maybe selling a product or a service that isn't regulated. And I think it's very key to understand that there are governance and structures and frameworks around most things in fintech or wealthtech or insurtech, which if you knew as an entrepreneur, you might be quite shocked by. But they're all there for the purpose of protecting our consumers, and to keep that in mind. I went through the journey. We raised money from angels and one institution, and then it was acquired actually quite early on, still when it was seed stage, by another larger fintech, insurtech company that was looking for the kind of services and solutions that we provided. And it's just a very exciting journey. And what I can say to companies is you have to understand first of all, your client and their pain points, and then develop the solution, build your market, build your fundraising, what you need, and so on. And each one of those is its own business plan. And you have to put resources and time into it. And it's something which actually we've held quite a few discussions at, I mentioned, Hive Founders, to help founders plan that journey and so on. And we could have a few talks just on those topics.
We'll take you up on that. We can do something with working fintech. And going back to what we were talking about juggling lots of different responsibilities in your work life and your personal life, how have you maintained that balance and used everything to help feed everything else?
So I know people talk about work-life balance and all of that. And I personally, certainly when I was a startup founder and I'm not even sure now. I don't really believe in it the way people talk about it. I think the best, from my perspective, that I could hope for, and most founders or most high energy entrepreneurs, and even high energy, corporate people, is periods of time where one is more than the other. So as opposed to, on a daily basis, have overall balance. I had to juggle a lot when my daughter was young. And, we previously spoke about how expensive childcare is. So that is a major challenge to me for a society like the UK. If we want to encourage entrepreneurs, we have to make that playing field a little bit more level. Because if you have no access to either family who are there available for childcare or a lot of money to pay for childcare, then inevitably it primarily lands up being the woman who sort of sits at home and doesn't use their talent or their experience or their energy to actually drive some sort of entrepreneurial venture. So that for me is one thing, is that being able to acknowledge the reality of childcare and have a solution to it if that's, something, an entrepreneurial venture that someone wants to start. That's the first thing. Or whatever carer obligations someone has. And also acknowledge that there's sacrifices that have to be made. I feel that there's almost no chance you can build a high growth business. I'm not talking about, a small business you run from home and it's just one person selling photo frames on Etsy. I'm talking about you want to grow a high growth business where you need to pump resources in, you need to be out there seeing clients, driving your growth, managing a whole bunch of complex resources, fundraising and so on. It is a serious commitment and you have to be very focused on that. So there are times when you have to just say, I can't do both. I can't have both. And in many cases, not have a holiday, sometimes for a few years. You can go away, but you aren't going to switch off. So I think in terms of overall mental health and balance, the things that I think are very helpful are exercise, any form of exercise that works for someone, whether it's a walk, a jog, a run, whatever it is, meditation or yoga, whatever works, if that resonates with someone. It doesn't work for everyone. And having a support structure of some sort. If you don't have family around, like, I'm not from the UK, so I don't have family, but we've almost created our own family through our support structure. And I was very fortunate in that respect during that period of time. I think a few of my very close friends could see it was not an easy process for me. And they provided help where needed. And that made a huge difference to me. If you are disciplined enough to switch off on holidays and weekends, then I would say that's another tool in the toolbox. And then the last one for me is being surrounded just by a fantastic team. That makes a huge difference if you are starting up a business, because then when you need support within the business, you've got people that you can rely on and depend on, and having some way where you can early identify people it's not working out with, or maybe are toxic, whatever the case may be, and you go your separate ways kind of thing, because that will also put stress and strain, and you want to be able to remove that to keep your eye on the goal and have your whole startup pointing in one direction of growth, not sort of trying to, I'm going this way and you're going that way and so on.
And I think in addition to that kind of that support network, just through, say, doing this podcast series, I've spoken to lots of amazing people, and through working fintech and, I push pull and the other things I'm involved in, you keep your network kind of keeps growing and keeps going up a level as well. And then you feed off that energy, and it's that old adage of, you're the combination of, or the average of the 5 people you hang around with, but you can pick and choose who those 5 people are. And it's really important. Like they can, if there is someone toxic that's in your life, you need to deal with it in whichever way you can, because you can't have anything holding you back and sapping out that energy that you need to be pumping it into your business. and your
Yeah.
family and everything else.
Yeah.
Um,
And on what you're saying, just to echo that, is essentially it's like an ecosystem. And especially in fintech, wealth tech, where things are changing so fast, there's not one person that has all the answers. We're not in a mature sector that you can say, oh, 50 years ago we did it like this, and this guy, he knows or she knows. So that ecosystem that you're referring to, I think it's worth adding as the fifth point of support. Where it could be finding mentors, could be finding equals who you can discuss things with informally. Sometimes it's finding a network that works, and also like this example you're saying, growing that.
Yeah, brilliant. In terms of, I suppose, going back to when you were early in your career or when you first came over and to the UK, is there any advice you would kind of give to yourself then, and more broadly to young people who might be studying or they've started their careers, but they see fintech and wealth tech and crypto and all these fast moving industries and want to get involved, but not too sure where to start? Have you got any advice for people in those positions?
Yeah. So I think first thing is identify whether you want to go into a company or whether you want to start your own. And there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, I want to start my own. I'm not sure what I want to do. So let me go in and learn I would recommend then going in at a slightly later stage fintech where you can learn the ropes across a number of divisions, because business has got multiple functions to it. So fintech, people think, oh, I need to be an expert in tech and finance. And actually, you don't need to be an expert in either of those, because there's marketing roles in a fintech. And you can come in as a recent grad or even during your studies, and you can learn, well, what do fintechs do in terms of marketing? And even within marketing, you could be a direct company like Starling or Revolut, or you could be a B2B or an enterprise company like an FNZ. So again, there are different roles within that. And you'll learn as you go about the sector and about the role. So you get both of that type of experience. Personally, I think that fintech and financial services are one of the most fantastic industries to be part of. And people who feel a bit mystified or concerned, or even, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to go into finance. It could be boring or it could be confusing. Actually, once you're in the sector, you learn so quickly. And London is for sure one of the global leaders in terms of fintech. So you're in the right place to learn even more and be well positioned for growth. And we spoke about marketing, but the same is true for HR. The same is true for technology. You might be a developer, but actually, you coming into financial services, you then learn and become that industry and sector expert to develop in fintech or on regulated products or whatever. So it's a wide range of opportunities, and you don't have to be in finance or in tech to deliver on them and be part of it. So yeah, and also the other thing I recommend is if you're a student and you got a business idea, just do it. I mean, if it's going to, the only thing it's going to do is cost you time, and you have time because you're young, you maybe don't have kids yet. Take the risk, take the step, be brave. I just think we've got a new generation of entrepreneurs, and we've seen that especially during COVID. People have stepped up their entrepreneurial ventures and so on, and just get out there and do it.
No, absolutely. I echo that 100%. That thing of risk and reward, you can take the most risk at the start of your career because all the doors are open to you, and all the doors will always remain open to you, but it's just slightly harder when you start going down one path. But at the beginning, you can choose anything that you want. You don't have all of the responsibilities that come as you might get a mortgage, and then you might have some children, and then your focus can change depending on your responsibilities. But it's kind of take that risk when you can, and you can always take the risks if they're calculated, but more so at the beginning of your career. But then, can you just talk about the risk and reward? Because there's the risk and then there's the reward, right? And that's something that with people who are looking at traditional finance is, it's been around for 600 years or longer. Banks have been around for that long. You've got an industry that is growing at, 5% a year or something very mediocre. But then you've got fintech, which is growing like 10x every single year, and what we say to, or Working Fintech says to people in our kind of community is, attach yourself to the right sector, fintech and Web3, that's the sector you want to be in. And then you can work out from there, after you dip your toe in, which company you like, which role you like, just get in there somewhere. And if you attach yourself to a fast-growing company, the knowledge you're going to learn, your earning potential as well, being attached to those fast-growing companies, is going to take you in a very different trajectory than if you just go and work at a bank. And working at banks, trying to get on a grad program is very, very competitive, whereas fintech's got this massive, opportunity out there, and they're just dying for people to come and work for them. They're recruiting like crazy, but that kind of risk and reward piece is something which I'm always, trying to pass that on. So it'd be good if you could elaborate on that as well.
Yeah. So again, I think it's also about someone knowing themselves. Sometimes you fit, your personality fits within a bank, and that's also fine. But within fintech, there's an opportunity also for much faster growth. So even if you're going into a larger fintech, the likelihood is, if you're in early enough, that you will rapidly, transition through the ranks because the company is growing as you are growing. And you kind of do that time early on, which is like seriously hard work as the business is building up. And so, then you are much more senior than you would be if you had just gone into a banking program. And that in itself is extremely rewarding, seeing what you've built and what you've been part of and all of that. In addition, in some fintechs, the salaries may be competitive with banks, depending on the role, and you get equity, which then could take it in an entirely different direction when the fintech lists or sells or to another corporate or whatever the case may be.
And as well, not to sugarcoat it, it's hard work working in startups. It's very demanding, but it is very rewarding, and you end up loving it because you really enjoy what you're doing, and you can feel the synapses in your brain firing all the time.
And the energy.
Yeah. And there's always new problems and new challenges, and it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just finish off with probably one last question. What would you say is a good mindset for young people to have who are coming into either the industry or looking to dip their toe in? What's a good mindset to have to succeed in this industry?
I'd say be open and persevere. So be open to opportunities, work hard, stay determined, and to persevere. So whenever, because there will be frustrations. There is no role where you're not faced with challenges. And just persevering through that will actually bring a huge amount of rewards in both your learning, the financial progress you make as your career develops, and so on. But you have to be very open-minded and be prepared to put in that hard work.
Fantastic. Felicia Meyerowitz Singh, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really, really interesting.
Matt.
If anyone wants to reach out, where's the best place to find you?
Maybe drop me a note on LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
I think Twitter as well. I'm Felicia at Felicia TEDx. So one of those two is probably the easiest.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt.